Hello everyone and welcome to episode 4 of ClydeCast here on Clyde92 TV, and in this episode we're going to be talking about the upcoming NBA season. Free agency is starting to die down. A lot of the players have already decided what teams they're going to, so this is the perfect time to look at all the teams' rosters and make some predictions for the upcoming NBA season. So this is going to be a two-part series. In this episode we're going to be talking about the Eastern Conference of the NBA and my predictions for the top 8 teams in the East, and then the next episode of ClydeCast will be my predictions for the Western Conference. And once you're done watching this video, you can go into the comments section below and tell me who are your top 8 teams for the Eastern Conference, and you can rank them from number 1 to number 8. So let's move on right into my list with the number 8 team, and I have the Indiana Pacers at the number 8 slot in the Eastern Conference. I know some of you are going to think this is a little bit low. The Pacers were one of the best teams in the NBA just a couple years ago, but they've definitely suffered some blows this offseason. David West signed away from the Pacers and he ended up going to San Antonio. The Pacers also traded away Roy Hibbert to the Los Angeles Lakers, essentially for a second round pick. Not the best trade for the Pacers, but they did get something out of it. And when you look at this Pacers team, there's really only two upsides to their team. One of them is that Monte Ellis signed with them. He's a decent shooting guard, but he's not going to be the guy that's going to lead the Pacers to a top spot in the East. And the other benefit that they have is the return of Paul George. After breaking his leg in the offseason last year, he'll finally be back with the Pacers, and he will have a very positive impact on that team. I think he's going to be an all-star this year. He's definitely a top small forward in the league in my book. But let's say Paul George isn't like he used to be, and for some reason that broken leg injury really got to him over the last season, and when he comes back this year, he's just not the same player. If a situation like that happens, I can see the Pacers not making the playoffs again. At the number 7 spot in the East, I put the Miami Heat, and I think that's a little bit of a surprise considering that they didn't make the playoffs this past year, but the Heat have made some very good moves in free agency and the NBA draft. In the draft, they got Justice Winslow with the 10th pick, and that's a steal within itself, and in free agency, they were able to hold on to a lot of the key assets that made the Heat a good team just a couple years ago. They re-signed Dwayne Wade, and they were able to re-sign Goran Dragic. I was pretty sure that one of those guys was going to decide to leave the team, but they were able to hold on to both of them. And let's not forget that Chris Bosh was injured for a good portion of the season last year. He'll be back this year. He'll be playing with the Heat, and the Heat also have Hassan Whiteside. Whiteside is probably one of the up-and-coming centers in the league. If he can just get his act together emotionally, the Heat could be a pretty solid team. Moving on to the number 6 spot in the East, I have the Milwaukee Bucks, and I think the Bucks were the number 6 team this past year, but they haven't really done much to improve their team. They still have Chris Middleton, who they signed to just an atrocious contract, but a lot of the players on that team are still developing. Jabari Parker was injured for a majority of last season. Hopefully he can be the NBA player that we all expect him to be. They also have Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Greek freak. He is still developing as a player. In a couple of years, I think he'll be one of the better guys in the league. And they also have Michael Carter-Williams. While MCW is a really nice point guard, he needs to work on his outside shot. Now, I'm not saying the Bucks are a bad team. I think they're going to be a really good team down the road. But for right now, they're just not a top team in the East. Now at the number 5 spot, I actually have the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks this past year were the number 1 team in the entire Eastern Conference. No one really thought they were going to be a top team in the East going into that year, but I honestly think that they were more of just a one-year wonder kind of team. Looking at their roster, they're really dependent on team basketball, and that's not a bad thing. But once you start losing players in free agency, like DeMarre Carroll, it's really hard to build a new team when you don't have that star guy. Yes, they have Al Horford, and yes, they have Paul Millsap, but can you really say those are going to be the guys that's going to take the Hawks to an NBA championship? They need someone that's going to be a top all-star in this league. And that's really sad to say, because once you see teams like the Hawks that don't have a star player, you kind of root for them because they're the underdog. They don't have that guy that's going to lead their team. They really depend on team basketball. You want to see a team like that win, and I feel like they really reached their peak last year, and once they played against Cleveland in the playoffs, it was evident that they weren't the number one team in the East, and I think after that, they're only really going to go downhill from there. So now we reach the top 4 in the Eastern Conference, and at the number 4 spot, I have the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors have just really maintained a lot of the players on that team that have been good for a while. They still have Kyle Lowry, Terrence Ross, Jonas Valanciunas, and Amir Johnson. All of those guys are really nice players, and they've been playing well as a team for the past couple years. But much like the Atlanta Hawks, they're going to be a good team. They're going to have a very good regular season. But once they reach the playoffs, they don't have that star player, and they're probably going to have a pretty quick first-round exit. Okay, so now at the number 3 spot, I have the Washington Wizards. And I know many of you may not agree with this because they lost Paul Pierce in free agency, but let's not forget that the Wizards are still a very strong team. John Wall and Bradley Beal are only getting better at this point. They have still not reached the peak of their careers, and I think once they reach their peak, they're going to be one of the best teams in the NBA. I think the Wizards are on the rise right now. They still have great players like Marcin Gortat and Nene, and you can just see it year after year watching this team play. They're constantly getting better. I think that will continue into this season. They're going to be the number 3 team in the East. Moving on to the number 2 spot, I have the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls did one of the best things they could possibly do this free agency in keeping Jimmy Butler on the team. I honestly thought that Jimmy Butler was going to leave Chicago. He probably could have gotten more money elsewhere, and I thought it would be difficult for them to manage him and Derrick Rose on the same team. But the Bulls were able to keep him on the team. Now, there are really only 2 arguments you can make against the Bulls, saying that they're not going to be a top team in the East. One of them is that Paul Gasol is on the decline of his career, and the other argument you can make is that Derrick Rose isn't the same player that he used to be. And to that, I say that Jimmy Butler is going to be one of the better players in the league in just a couple years. It was evident this past year that he's getting so much better year in and year out. He was either the most improved or defensive player of the year. I'm not sure which one he was, but just watching this guy play, you can tell that he has potential. And now moving on to the number 1 spot, I'm sure you guys all guessed it from the moment that you clicked on this video. It is the Cleveland Cavaliers. There is no doubt in my mind that if the Cavaliers are not the number 1 team, they'll probably be the number 2 team. And just looking at their roster, it's obvious that they're one of the best teams in the East. They have Kevin Love, Kyrie Irving, and LeBron James. If all 3 of those guys can stay healthy in the playoffs, I think that they could win the NBA Finals this year. But that's a topic for another video. So now make sure you go into the comments section below and tell me who are your top 8 teams, because I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. Anyways, I hope you guys had a fun time watching this video. Be sure to have a great day. God bless you guys.